Okay, so thanks for joining us this afternoon for a clinical and commercial update on Heosep. In the webinar, we've got Amanda Cook, who is one of our international sales managers. She's going to go through and give you a bit of a commercial update on Heosep. And then following on from Amanda, we've got Darren Clements, who is our clinical support specialist. He's going to give a clinical update, running through some of the latest study data, some product evaluations and some testimonials. And then finally, we've got Abdul Chowdhury and Jayesh Taylor from BVM Medical, who are our UK distribution partners. They've put together a few slides to take you through their experience of gaining market access in the UK, some case studies, as well as some FAQs and how they handle them. At the end of the session, we will have a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, if you just add them into the chat function at the bottom, we'll pick them up and address them at the end. And also just to let you know, the webinar is being recorded this afternoon, and we will share a link with you this week so that you can view it again if you would like to. So without any further ado, I'll pass you on to Amanda.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Darren's just sharing my slides now. So this is just a brief commercial update, just to give you an idea of what we've been doing and achieved over the last couple of years. So again, this is just to give you a bit of background since we launched Heosep in October 2019. We've got some Q&As and a chat box that you can do at the end. So this is the timeline since we launched Heosep. So we launched the product at EACTS in Lisbon, which was the 33rd conference. At that time, obviously, coronavirus was not around, so we had loads of visitors. And just following on nicely from that, in the November, we were awarded with the CE mark for Heosep, which meant that we got all excited after waiting for 4 years, and we could start shipping product out to the various distributors in order to start demonstrations and live cases. So that happened in Q1 of 2020. And of course, we all know what happened in March 2020, when we all had to lock down for coronavirus. And throughout that time, we could do various demonstrations, but everybody was at different stages of lockdown. Darren did manage to get out to a couple of cases during 2020, but we'll hear about those later. But it wasn't till really July 2021 that a lot of the elective surgery resumed in various countries throughout Europe. Although might have been sporadic, it meant that we could do a bit more work. And then in October of last year, we managed to do our first conference and exhibition as Advances Surgical in Barcelona. And then we hoped that normality would resume from December last year. And hopefully 2020 will be a bright year for us. Next slide. And this is to give you an idea of the total sales volume that we've done so far. And as you can see, 60% of all the volume that we've sold in terms of equipment and consumables have gone out in 2021. Obviously, we tried as best we could in 2019 and 2020 during the difficult period, but we've got a good start in 2022. And this is just to give you a ranking of the areas in which we've sold the units. So, of course, the UK, our domestic market, being a little bit more open to start work. This is where most of this volume has come from. And then we've had substantial orders from Malaysia, some from France, a little bit from Germany and the Philippines, and other markets, but I haven't gone beyond that, just to give you an idea. So the total number of units that we've sold altogether so far since this 2019 launch is 1,055, comprising of 44 shakers, 602 of the cell concentrator kits, which includes the Heosep bag, and 293. So this slide gives you an idea of the worldwide appointed distributors that we have. The ones in yellow are those 26 that are fully appointed with distribution agreements. And then we've got another 18 in negotiation at the moment. Obviously, there's a big concentration in Europe, but we are looking, closely at other markets throughout the world. And we've got lots of prospects that we are undertaking as well. So this slide here just shows you some of the key distributors so far that have managed to do quite a bit of work, which Darren will explain more in detail. But I wanted to give you an idea of the spread of where the countries where we have appointed distributors as well. So you can see these here in Europe, Asia, Africa and South America. And many of these prospects have come off the back of getting the CE awarded. And obviously we haven't been able to do anything in terms of the markets that require FDA yet, but of course they will follow very soon. We have managed to showcase Heosep a couple of times over the past year or so. 2021 in the October, we managed to go to Barcelona. As I said, it's a 4-day event for leading cardiac surgeons around the world. And surprisingly, we not only got visitors from Europe, but South America and the Gulf, which was great to see. So we did actually pick up a few new leads there as well. In addition to that, our distributor in Italy, Levi Bio, managed to go to a cardiac surgeons conference in December in Rome. So that was their first conference ever for Heosep. And even though the participation was low due to COVID, they have had really good feedback, and it's leading to further meetings that they've arranged for 2022. So it was really worthwhile. And looking back again in 2021, BVM, our distributor partner in the UK, managed to go to Manchester in December for the Vascular Society Conference, which again was a 3-day event with all the leading vascular surgeons, which has led to a live demo in Doncaster, which Darren will give you some more details, and Abdul later. And then ones we've got to look forward to for next year is the 36th conference of EACTS, which will be based in Milan in the October. And again, we're exhibiting as Advances Surgical over the 4-day event. So we're expecting everybody to come from around the world this time as restrictions start to lift. So that's a really exciting prospect. And one thing we have been asked for in terms of the commercial side of Heosep is to look at the different pricing models available to Heosep in the different markets. Now, I know it's different from market to market, but we've got 2 main models available to us, really. We found that because the shaker unit, the actual price of it is lower than a lot of the capital equipment that you would see in the cell salvage market. It does actually come under a lot of capital equipment budgets. So this is really attractive for the hospitals, and also less of an investment for the distributor. So there's little or no servicing costs to the equipment, which is an advantage over some of these more complicated systems. And you can sell the consumables without the need to recoup the costs of the equipment. We do have some comparison models available, which Darren will probably highlight a bit later, and we have got some information that we could send you if you require. The general model that we've seen throughout the world established by other cell salvage producers is the loan or rental model. The shaker unit would go out on loan or rental from the distributor to the end user. But this is a good chance to create a buy-in for the system. The loan or rental model, as I said, is already established in the market, and it means that you can have an agreement in place for the purchase of the consumables. And one advantage of the Heosep is that the consumables are comparative in price to the traditional cell savers. And we do remind people that the technology is in the bag of the Heosep system and not in the actual capital equipment. So we do have to remind people when looking at this particular model. So just to highlight that, you're seeing a few of us now, but we are part of a bigger team, and we are here to help you as the distributor. It is a team effort. I know a lot of you have spent time with Darren, our clinical support manager, and he is available, or can be available, 24-hour with prior appointment to help with calls and with live events when he's not able to travel. The plan is to get back to normality where Darren can come out and help you with your first live cases. But in the meantime, Darren is on call, when and where possible. You will possibly have met your international sales manager. So there's Ron, Emma, John and myself within the international team. But we have also got a good marketing team, Jessica and Steve. The customer support team you may also have come across, which is Sarah, Michaela and Molly. And then in terms of commercial support, we have Alistair and Michaela. So if there are tenders that you see coming up for cell salvage, please get in touch and we will get Alistair and Michaela on the case. In terms of the legal team for distribution agreements, but also agreements with hospitals if there's any trials to go ahead, we have Craig, the legal manager, and also Michaela. And then we have Amy and Craig on a regulatory team, but there are others that can jump in if we need any expertise. So, we are part of a bigger team. So I'd just like, from a commercial perspective, just to say thank you very much for continuing to support Heosep. I know it's been a really difficult time and we couldn't have picked a worse time to launch a new product. But thank you ever so much for your efforts so far. And I'd like to pass you on to Darren now. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to go across now some of the clinical feedback we've had and a little bit of information about the studies and some comparison models over costing and some of the feedback we've received recently. So if there are any questions, clinical or commercial, we type them in the Q&A part of the webinar. What we'll do is we'll address all the questions at the end between us as a team and direct them to the most relevant person that can answer your query if you have any. Okay, so current clinical feedback. So we do have an evaluation form for Heosep. So if you're doing live cases, the evaluation forms are really, really valuable tool for us and for yourselves to give us some feedback on the case and the usage and the impressions of the machine and the usage of it by end users. So as we stand at the moment, we've had 27 evaluation forms completed and returned to me from 4 different countries. You can see here. The main brunt of them have come from the UK at the moment. It's actually 29 because I've actually received 2 more this morning from Abdul for cases that were done yesterday. We have had 11% of those from Spain, 4 from Belgium, and then the last 4% from Germany, but they are a really valuable tool. So I've collated them all, and it's given us some valuable data, which I'll share with you in a second. For those of you that haven't seen Heosep in use, we do try to take some photos when I'm in the cases, or customers send them to me. This is the bag being filled from an oxygenator on the bypass circuit, which is an option for filling the bag. Our reservoir and machine in use, that's filling the bag from the reservoir. Now, I appreciate some people may not have seen Heosep actually in use with blood on and working. So we have a small video here, so you can actually see the waveform that I always talk about in my training, if you've had training with me, the bag processing with inside the machine and it rotating just the top part. Okay. So some of the user comments on their feedback, and they really reflect what we say in our marketing as well, with the ease of use, simple for setup, and the processing of the blood's very simple compared to the traditional machines. And also we've had some comments about the amount of blood salvage that we're getting back. So we are saving good amounts of blood from what we've salvaged, either from bypass or from the surgical site. And I'll share some figures on that in a second with you. Some of the other comments, you know, as it says there, very easy to use compared to what's on the market. You know, I do emphasize during our sessions, you know, our training sessions that I've had with some of you, you know, that traditional self-service can be quite complicated to set up and use with menus and things, but ours is very easy, and that's been echoed in some of the feedback we've had. And again, a good volume of red cells produced, which I'll show you the figures on that in a second. Okay. So type of surgery that these evaluation forms have come back from so far is we have 84% of these cases are cardiac currently. We have done some vascular cases, but as I say, they only make up about 4% of the total forms returned. And then we're slowly increasing our numbers of orthopedic evaluation forms back. We have a centre in the UK now that has actually placed the machine, purchased, and are using it regularly in spinal surgery. Types of surgery it's used, so it is being used an awful lot in cardiac. We have collected the type of surgery that it's been used in, lots of valve replacements, and the main one for us at the moment is bypass, coronary artery bypass grafting. But the orthopedic one does feature in there at the moment, where I've got 3 evaluation forms back for that case at the moment. Some of the outcomes that we've pulled from it, the big one is the reduction in allergenic blood use, which I always talk about during my training, because also we're saving our red cells, our platelets, and our clotting factors. So that has a benefit for the patient in reducing that bleeding post-operatively. So that's led to a reduction in the evaluation forms that I've had of about 73% of those cases have not had to have a red cell or any other components from the blood bank, allergenic blood juice given to them. There is always those small cases, that 23% where patients' hemoglobin may be low during the surgery while they're on bypass, and they will put some red cells in from the blood bank to get that up. Okay, or if the volume's a little bit low in the machine, they will boost the volume with a bit of red cells. Okay, but really important is that, you know, 75% of our patients that are using Heosep are not getting the allergenic blood use. It also looks at hemoglobin increase post-transfusion on our evaluation forms, and this is all if they are recording it and doing blood gases. So not every centre will do a hemoglobin or a ACT on the patients. But out of the ones that we've had, 90% of these have had a hemoglobin increase post-transfusion. Okay. And then it goes on to look at some of the feedback from their perceptions of the device. As you can see here, out of our return forms, we're sitting up really high on it. They would be very likely to incorporate it into their current protocols. Now, whether that's to replace their current machine and just use Heosep as a standalone device, or to incorporate it and use it alongside Heosep, alongside a traditional machine for select cases where they feel the need for it, especially in pediatrics, where it can process smaller volumes. The overall feedback, though, on the ease and simplicity of the device has been really positive across the forms that we've had back so far. It currently sits around about for 85% of ease of use. So I talked about the good amount of blood that has been salvaged. What we have here is we've actually salvaged over those 27 cases during surgery and processed is 28,800 millilitres of blood, which is just shy of 29 litres of blood have been processed by Heosep across those evaluation forms. Now, after processing, we've managed to save and give back to patients just shy of 17 litres of blood. So this is where they're talking about a really good level of salvage and a good volume of blood that's being returned. And across those cases, the average amount of blood we are getting back on each process is around about 280 millilitres. So we'll process 500 millilitres, and at the end of that process, we are getting 280 millilitres of blood back to give to the patient per bag, which is a really good volume. Now, this has led to some potential cost savings. So if we look at how much we salvaged and the average amount of blood that we would find in a bag of packed red cells from the blood bank, it works out around about 60 bags of red blood cells that we haven't had to transfuse. Now, we've based it on our local market, and a bag of red cells sits around about £146 at the moment. So if we times that, the 60 bags by 146, we had a potential saving of £8,780 of allergenic blood use to the NHS, which is, you know, a considerable amount of blood being saved, especially when it's a scarce resource, and also a massive cost saving. So a little bit on the cost comparison that Amanda mentioned a second ago. So we'll look at the centrifuge first. This is available as an Excel spreadsheet that we can send to you, that you can then translate into your local market and local currencies and costs to see, you know, your cost benefits for your local market. So we always look at staff time, which is based on the theatre staff and how long it would take them to set up and use the machine and clean down at the end. The consumables, including the saline and the heparin. And then at the bottom, we look at, especially with a traditional centrifuge, is the data that we've gleaned from our Gourlay clinical paper, where it looked at the average amount of allergenic blood use with a traditional centrifuge cell saver. So it's based on these 2.4 units that are talked about in the clinical paper, and we come out at the end with an end cost of around just shy of £700 for us, £697 for a use of a centrifuge cell saver because of this additional cost of this blood here. If we compare that to Heosep, we still have the same staff time. Everything's based on 2 Heosep cell concentrator bags because the average bags used per case we found across all the evaluations is about 2.4, it works out, bags per patient. 1 intraoperative kit per case, and then our heparin, and only 1 bag of saline with Heoseps. We found across all the cases we're really only using 1 litre of saline just to keep that blood anticoagulated, as where a traditional cell saver is using 5 or 6 because it needs to wash all those cells. And because we've seen the reduction in allergenic blood use and they're not using it with Heosep, we can omit that from this costing, which then gives us an overall costing for a Heosep treatment of £468. So if we compare them side by side, that gives us a cost saving around about 33% of using Heosep over a traditional cell saver because of that reduction in allergenic blood use, which has quite a large cost to the hospital or to the patient in a private care setting. So some of the hospitals, the column on the left are hospitals that have all done cases so far since the relaunch of Heosep and are looking to do more. So the top 2, Newcastle and Denmark, they have done some cases. They're looking to do some more for us. Glenfield have recently finished a 10-case evaluation that we are currently waiting for the report on. Germany, they've done a case for us, and that was one of the ones that I've been to quite recently at the back end of last year. The Doncaster Royal Infirmary, say we had the the Vascular Society meeting, and the case was only done last week, and that was supported by Abdul and Jayesh from BVM for us. Queen's Medical Centre has been this week, and then Harley Street Orthopaedic Clinic is the centre that asked for a trial. They had the machine and then it went on to purchase, and it's been used every week now for spinal fusion surgery. Okay, so that's a fully placed machine being used by the theatre staff every week. Kuwait did a case before the lockdown, and I'm due to go again very shortly, hopefully out to Kuwait to do some more cardiac surgery with them. And then Murcia in Spain. I was in Spain back end of last year again, and over 3 days we did 4 cases in 3 different hospitals. And I'll talk a little bit more about Spain on my next slide. The ones on the right hand side all have kit and equipment in their local markets, and are waiting for me to travel or to get access to the hospitals to do some cases and do their first live cases that we're aware of. The bottom one, the Children's Hospital in Belgium, they like the idea of Heosep in the children because it will handle those small volumes that a traditional cell saver really struggles with. So lots of work been done, lots more to come. So current clinical work pending. So we do have our library of clinical evidence with our clinical studies and our poster presentation that we have at the moment. We are working on some other clinical work, just so everyone is aware. So St Bart's in London has had the kit for a little while, but due to the COVID and everything, they've sort of restricted what they're doing and obviously getting in there. So they are very keen to start a study for us in paediatrics and children with Heosep. Doncaster went incredibly well last week. There have been discussions way before the pandemic about a pilot study with a view to going on to a full multi-centre study. So that's now looking more promising for us. I'm sure there'll be discussions between Doncaster, myself and BVM in the UK moving forward. Now Spain, after visiting there, the University Hospital in Murcia are very keen now to do a full clinical study. So they're going to take Heosep and put it up against a traditional cell saver. Very much like one of our clinical papers we have now, but they're going to look at some other outcomes, lots of blood biomarkers and clotting and rotems and thromboelastometry and lots of other things for us. So we are on the verge of starting that. That will then be published in a peer-reviewed journal, hopefully later in the year. So that is good for us. We're going to have a nice new clinical paper in, but that is in cardiac. Germany were impressed with the machine, but they would also like to write, we did an adult case, but they want to do some pediatric cases and write us a one-page or an evaluation report that we can publish and use for our marketing. And then there's one missing off there, which I've only been told about this morning by Amanda. Brazil are very keen also to do some sort of pilot study evaluation for us, but details to that will follow as we have more discussions with them. So there is newer clinical work pending and due to come hopefully in 2022. So that's the end of the update really on the evaluation forms that I have. So the evaluation forms are really important. So if you are doing live cases, we do have the evaluation form. And it is electronic, so you can carry it on your laptop and fill it in while you're at the case, and then it'll be sent to me after the case, so I can then add them to our nice library of evidence and add them into the data. Okay, if you need them, just contact me and I can send them across to you. Okay, but I'd like to introduce now Abdul Chowdhury. He's the clinical product specialist for BVM Medical, our UK distribution partner. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so he can have his slides shared now. Okay. So Abdul.
And today I'll be sharing my experience working with Heosep Cell Saver. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat area and I will try to answer them at the end of the session. I have been working with Heosep for approximately 6 months now, and so far I have supported 30 cases, 26 cardiac, 3 spinal, and 1 vascular, and pediatric. I would like to share a couple of cases with you. The first being a Jehovah's Witness patient that was having a 3rd or 4th cardiac redo case. So the surgeon was expecting heavy blood loss. The patient lost approximately 3 liters of blood, and we transfused back 2.5 liters using Heosep alone. And on that day, we processed 8 bags in total. A couple of days after, I caught up with the surgeon to find out how the patient was doing, and I was very pleased to learn that the patient was doing well, and the surgeon was extremely happy because the post-operative bleeding was very minimal compared to what he had anticipated, and he was very thankful for Heosep. The other case I would like to highlight was a small child weighing 7 kilograms and again having a cardiac case. We processed 3 bags in total. The first 2 bags were processed with blood from the bypass machine, and you can see from the data that on both occasions the patient's hemoglobin and the hematocrit increased after each transfusion. The 3rd bag was processed from the blood collected in the reservoir. Now, if that 200 mils was to be processed using the traditional cell saver, we would have got nothing back. However, with Heosep, we received 110 mils, and that is a significant amount for a small child. Also, you can see we've processed as little as 100 mils, and we got 90 mils back. So Heosep is going to be huge in the pediatric world and play a big part. I find Heosep very easy to set up and to use, and also very easy to train people. Because the Heosep system is so simple to use, I keep my training very simple, and I usually say there is only 3 steps to processing Heosep blood. The first is to collect the blood in the reservoir. The second step is to decant that blood into the processing bag. And the final step is to place the processing bag in the Heosep shaker. And after 20 minutes of agitation, the blood is ready to be transferred into the giving bag and given to the anaesthetist to transfuse. I get asked by the surgeons, is there anything different they need to do when using Heosep system? And I always give them the reassurance that their practice always stays the same, and they will still continue to collect and suction blood as they have been doing so. And also they have the option to use their own suction wand. The Heosep system is very compact, and as you know, in the theatre environment, there is space is very limited. And in the UK, we usually place the Heosep shaker on a small dressing trolley, and still we have enough space to do the processing. And also the majority of the setup can be done before the patient comes into theatre. For example, setting up the reservoir, the suction, and also priming the reservoir with the heparinized saline. Therefore, when the patient comes into theatre, the Heosep system is readily available for the surgeon to use. Some of the frequently asked questions. How cost effective is Heosep Cell Saver? Darren mentioned the cost difference between the Heosep and the traditional Cell Saver. It is always important to remember and to highlight that with every bag processed by Heosep, you are giving back all blood components. That is your red cells, platelets, and your clotting factors. And in the UK, donor blood is quite expensive. Is quite expensive. And if you look at our clinical study papers, you can see that patients who had a Heosep transfusion had one less day stay in ICU. And as you know, the cost of ICU is very expensive, and overnight stay can cost thousands of pounds. So with Heosep, the hospital will be saving a lot of money. And not only that, with the Heosep system, they will be eliminating the risk of transfusion reaction and also giving patients the wrong blood. And in my opinion, you can't really put a price on that. How easy it is to use Heosep Cell Saver. With all the professionals I have worked with, they found they picked up Heosep very easily. Working with the theatre practitioners, I have found that often they can go a long period of time without using Cell Saver. And with the traditional Cell Saver, they find it quite difficult to remember how to set it up and how to use it when they haven't used it for some time. Whereas with the Heosep, they feel that because how simple it is, they will have no problem remembering how to use Heosep even if they haven't used it for some time. What clinical papers have been published? So there are 3 studies that have been done for Heosep Cell Saver, and all clinical papers are electronically available to share. The other question I get asked quite often is 20 minutes can be too long to process. I mean, I have done 30 cases so far, and 20 minutes has never been a problem or an issue. Just last week, I supported a vascular case where the patient lost over 3 liters of blood, and we managed that patient's blood transfusion with Heosep alone. We used 2 Heosep shakers. So after the first bag was processed and the anesthetist was transfusing the first bag, the second bag was already being processed and ready to be given to the anesthetist to transfuse, which meant before the first bag finished being transfused, the second bag was already available. And this happened with the 3rd, 4th, 5th, up to the 9th bag that we transfused on that day. And yes, with the traditional Cell Saver, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to process, but you have to remember that you are only giving back red cells. And if you were to give back donor clotting factors, it can take a very long time. For example, to thaw a bag of fresh frozen plasma, it can take between 40 to 50 minutes, if not longer. What training is available? Because this Heosep system is so simple to use, I usually provide training while supporting the cases. Yesterday, I supported 2 cardiac cases, and I managed to train and sign off 7 perfusionists. And they each demonstrated at least one bag of process, and they did that without any problems. I hope you have found this useful, and please feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Abdul. That's really interesting to see Heosep being used in practice. So I'm just, so there's a lot of questions here. Can we use our device in severe blood loss cases where patients need continuous blood supply?
Okay, I think this is one for me. I've got the question here, so I'll address all the parts in it as we go through. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
So can we use our device in severe blood loss cases? Yes, if the surgeon can wait that little bit longer, and they need to wait that little bit longer for the blood. As soon as you have
Oh, Darren, you've gone on mute.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, so you can, but as soon as you've got 500 mils in the reservoir, I would process it there and then. And then every time you get 500 mils, but you can run 2 machines next to each other. I know BVM have had 2 machines on the go in one theatre at the same time. can use the kits more than one time. So the intraoperative kit could be used one per patient, so you can keep refilling and emptying that, but the bags are one use. So it's one bag for every 500 mils that you are processing. Is there any need for the device in heart and chest operations in children? So children will tolerate blood loss a lot less than an adult would. So, you know, if they lose 200-300 mils, that has a bigger impact on them than you or I losing 200 or 300 mils. So there is a need for it. And if you're using a traditional cell saver as well, in that sort of case, they've lost their platelets, they've lost their clotting factors as well. And then you put back in a traditional cell savage, red cells in saline, and you will further dilute them. So by using Heosep, you're giving them back their platelets and their clotting factor as well. So we're not going to dilute them any further. Excuse me. Can we use the device parallel with the heart-lung machine? Or use it when there is no heart-lung machine? Yes, you can use it in both cases. So if the patient is on a heart-lung machine or bypass, so when they're on the machine and they've refilled the patient at the end, there's always a residual volume left in the machine. Okay, so a lot of times they will take that residual volume at the end and put it into a bag, process it to give back to the patient so it's not wasted. Or you can also set the device up when they're on bypass and salvage any blood from the surgical site as well, if there is any. And then at the end, process as well the residual volume at the same time. So you can use it with or without heart-lung. Okay. What is the average do we use in normal operation? So I presume you mean which kits. So if they are only wanting to process the residual volume that is left in the heart-lung at the end of the case, and you don't want to salvage from the surgical site, you would only need the shaker unit and the bags. Okay. If they are not on bypass, or you're in another surgical area, something like vascular or orthopedics, or some cardiac surgery where they are off pump, you could then use the shaker, the bags, and you would need the collection kit, so the intraoperative kit. I'm not sure what you mean by the last one. We need contact number of any reference list. Is that reference sites, I presume you mean? I'm sure as we get reference sites and our KOLs on board, that we will share them and maybe look at having another webinar, a clinical based one with some more KOLs involved. Okay, hopefully, Mohammed, that answers your questions. I can't see if there's any others.
There's just one more question in the chat.
Let me open the chat up as well.
So could you please speak about the hydration of the hemo concentration bag?
The hydration. Is that from Moti? What do you mean by hydration?
The priming, Darren.
The priming?
Mm-hmm.
The priming. Okay, so the priming of the bags, if that's what you're on about, Moti. So the bags come unprimed. So no more than 3 minutes before you want to put the blood into the bag, you need to get 100 milliliters of normal saline. That's 0.9% sodium chloride, 100 mils of it, okay, in a syringe or from the bottle, and put it into the Heosep bag, okay. Close the clamps and gently rock it for about 20 to 30 seconds. And what that does is that all goes through the membrane into the superabsorbent core, activates the core and the middle, and makes the process effective and gets the bag ready to receive the blood. If it's done too long before the blood is introduced, so longer than 3 minutes before, it reduces the effectiveness of the bag. Okay, so I normally do it between a minute or 2 minutes before I want to put the blood in. So once I know I've almost got 500 mils, I'll start preparing the bag and the saline and put it in. As soon as it's all absorbed through that membrane, you can introduce blood into the bag then. Okay, so that's the correct way of doing it. Hope that answers your question, Moti.
And then we've just had a request to send the slides out. So just to let you all know, we'll be sending out these slides along with a recording of the webinar following the end of the session today. It will probably be tomorrow or Friday that you'll receive that. that looks like it's all the questions. I will give it a couple of moments just in case anyone else has a question they want to send in.
I will say, if anybody wants the evaluation form from me, the new updated one, just to drop me an email. Okay, I think everybody on the call has my email. If not, just email the office and they'll put you in contact with me. If you've got any requests for literature or say the evaluation or any other clinical questions going forward, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay.
Okay, so there's been no more questions. So that concludes the webinar. So, oh, we just got one more question.
Oh.
Would you be available for us to send our reps to attend your surgeries?
Nuno, you want me to come to Portugal? I take it. I knew there was a plan for it when we met at EACS. If you give me a ring or email me, we'll have a chat. Or for you to go to the UK. We might have to have some discussions with Jayesh offline about that one potentially. No worries.
Moti has just mentioned that he didn't see a big difference for HCT and HB before and after using the machine.
Moti, I can send you the data from our evaluation forms that look at the hematocrit and the percentage increases. It varies because obviously it depends on how dilute the blood is to start with to how far up we get at the end. So the more concentrated it is to start, the higher result we're going to get at the end. If it's a lower at the start, you're going to get slightly less. But I'll pull out the data that you need, Moti, and I'll get it across so you can get a feel for what we've seen across our 27 evaluation forms I've had back. Yeah, he said that should help him.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions. Yeah. Okay, so that concludes the webinar for today. Thank you everyone for joining. And like Darren said, if you do have any questions or you need any support, just get in touch and we'll be happy to help you. And yeah, thank you for joining.